everyone, welcome to your third mini lesson. This time I'm going to take you through a jazz chart that I wrote for an album that I did some years ago. It was the first album of original jazz music that I'd ever produced. Up to that point in my life, I had been only composing music for chamber groups and choruses in the classical concert world. And meanwhile, I was playing tons of jazz gigs on the piano, playing all jazz standards, but I never really joined the two. So I sat down to work on my own original jazz album, having no idea what it would end up sounding like because I'd never tried anything like that before. At the time that I was working on it, I was digging into James Joyce's amazing book, The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, and I had this brainstorm idea. What if I take lines from this book that I love and make jazz charts using them as titles? So as I was reading through the book, I was seeing lots of sentences that I thought would make great titles for tunes. So that gave me a good way to work on this album, which I ended up calling Jazz Portrait. So there's a song about our protagonist when he first falls in love. And there's a song about the school bully. This James Joyce quote gave me lots of musical ideas. For this tune, I tried to capture the atmosphere of this beautiful nature scene. Okay, so I love this sentence too. Dieu was French for God, and that was God's name too. And when anyone prayed to God and said Dieu, then God knew at once that it was a French person that was praying. So how was I going to write a tune that was about God and France? Somehow I was struck with this idea. I love visiting the Notre Dame Cathedral on some trips I did to Paris, and this is the birthplace of some really important sacred music. So, what if I take a melody from the Notre Dame school that's associated with composers like Léonin and Periton around the 1100s, and I make a jazz chart out of it? How might that work? So, sacred music from France. Sounded like it might express this Joyce passage I was trying to depict. So the melody I found from the Notre Dame school is in D Dorian. So I came up with a little left-hand ostinato that I could play along with that, while the bass player and I play the melody in unison. So that's the first time through, which you'll hear in a minute on the recording. Now the next time through, the chant melody, the saxophone, and the drums enter. So what if I harmonize this melody with block chords all over a D pedal point? So take a look. The first 6 bars are all chords that belong to D Dorian, all the white notes on the piano. Then I wanted to shift into some other key centers. So midway through bar 7, I switched to D major, which is almost a Picardy third kind of feel. Then I slip into D natural minor for bar 8. Bar 9 moves around even more. I use chromatic parallelism here over the D pedal. So all of the coming chords are major 7 chords in various keys. I like them in third inversion because of the half step at the bottom. If you want to check out a cool jazz arranging book that illustrates this idea of chromatic parallelism, I first saw it laid out in this book by Bill Dobbins. So you will hear all this in a minute. Okay, so now for the soloing section. I guess one option would have been just to solo modally in D minor, that would have worked. But I wanted to try something different. What if I tried to use some of the things that I learned in my music history class about the schools of Notre Dame and their early polyphony techniques called organum? So one thing these composers did was to take a melody and to stretch it out in the bass and write all kinds of florid stuff above it. So is there a way to do that for a jazz chart? The bass player is going to be playing the chant augmented. It's stretched out so it's 3/8 notes each. The melody is going to always be there underneath the music, and I'm going to harmonize the bass line. So here's what I came up with for my harmonies for the soloing section. So as you're looking at this, a couple things to look out for. So look out for lots of inverted chords or slash chords in here, which create a certain suspense and unpredictability that I liked. Also, look out for a lot of root position major 7 chords. I think I was hinting back to all the major 7th chords that I used in my block chord harmonization earlier. Look for them to be moving around by half steps and whole steps, like in these measures. This is sort of like what Bill Evans does in his song 12 Tone Tune 2. It's all major 7th chords moving around in half and whole steps. It can be interesting to take one chord quality and move it around like that. Also, look out for some of these major 7 chords to be moving in major and minor thirds, kind of like Chick Corea does in Tones for Jones Bones. These are sometimes called chromatic third or chromatic median modulations. And look out for Phrygian chords. Here's an example, E flat major 7 over D. So some improvisers use the D Phrygian mode for improvising on this chord. So would a composer 900 years ago ever imagine that someone would be doing this to their music 9 centuries later? Probably not, but to me there's something cool and inspiring about borrowing someone's melody from that long ago and reimagining it or recasting it. Of course, this is nothing new. Much of my favorite music are these projects where musicians borrow from classical music for their material, or they use chamber ensembles in the context of a jazz band. These places where the divisions blur and categories disappear as one thing melds into another. Check out these quotes. Here's Bill Evans. I believe, first of all, that the person who sees into the future the farthest is the person who sees into the past the farthest. And here's a quote by my teacher, Lucas False. If you want to have one big foot in the future, you have to have one big foot in the past. One gets the sense that the more history you know, the more inventive you may be as a musician. Here's a great Miles quote. I always thought that music had no boundaries, no limits to where it could grow and go, no restrictions on its creativity. Good music is good music, no matter what kind of music it is. And I always hated categories, always. Never thought it had any place in music. So the takeaway may be that you might find that you're able to use Debussy's voicings and Stravinsky's shifting accents and Carter's metric modulations in whatever you're working on. I've been using charts I made of classical pieces for years on jazz gigs. Some of them didn't even need any reharmonization or rearranging at all. They're just great vehicles for playing on just the way they are. I love being a music theory teacher because my hands are always in this stuff. I find that if you want to keep growing as a composer, keep teaching. There's so much to learn in teaching others, and there's also a lot to learn by returning to the same music year after year and teaching it and remembering why you love it in the first place. I definitely think that going really deep with one piece of music is a lot better than going not so deep with 10 different pieces of music. Okay, enough of that. Let's listen to the tune now. So I hope you like checking that out. Maybe you found some new ideas you can use. It's funny, years later a choral conductor approached me and asked if I would come up with something where I improvise while the singers are singing. And I thought of this music, and it's sort of interesting, this original vocal melody, which I had transformed into the jazz chart. I then took my jazz chart and transformed it back into a vocal, a choral piece. I have a link below to that choral piece if you want to check it out. Alrighty, y'all, so keep on writing. See you guys next time. Take care.